In Japan, there is a certain forest, and you may know which forest I'm talking about if you've been following Logan Paul for a while. And well, after the co-main event of UFC 328, I was on my way to that forest with my rope and my stool and everything. But then, right before I tied the knot, I got a notification on Twitter. I opened my phone and saw the video. Bruce Buffer announcing and new. Khamzat Chimaev, his face broken, red and battered, wrapping the belt around Sean Strickland. And that was the moment when I knew that, regardless of what had happened in the co-main event, I had to move on. Not because I had mentally recovered, but because I knew that my sadness at having watched Tatsuro Taira get beaten up is microscopically minuscule compared to the coping, the seething, and the impotent rage that was going to flow without end from the worst fan base in MMA. And that gave me a reason to cling on, because my anguish would be nothing compared to what was to come. And oh boy, was it hilarious. So buckle up, guys, as I take you through a grand tour of the generational cope that has burst onto the MMA space in the wake of Khamzat Chimaev's loss to Sean Strickland. In this video, we will break down the coping and seething and excuses that are coming from every party that cannot fathom the fact that Khamzat Chimaev, the most dominant wrestler in MMA history, who also reportedly kidnapped and married a 17-year-old as his second wife, by the way, lost to a bald white guy with a jab, a teep, and daddy issues. From other MMA YouTubers to randoms on the internet to Chimaev's own team, we will be savoring the delicious cope and relishing every last bit of it. So, starting with a cope about the weight cut, this was started by an interview that Khamzat Chimaev's brother did with some Russian MMA news outlet, where he apparently said that Kadyrov's dog's body shut down with 1.2 kilograms or 2.6 pounds left to go in the weight cut. He also said that Khamzat supposedly weighed 105 kilograms or 231.5 pounds before the fight with Strickland was booked, because he was actually supposed to fight Yuri Prochazka up at 205 pounds. But then he ended up getting asked to fight Sean instead. And now, upon this news being announced, the co-sanguineous marriage enthusiasts in the MMA community and Kenneth Okoye, who blocked me on Twitter as soon as I passed his subscriber count, began their full-on cope sessions about how this brutal weight cut compromised Khamzat.
I feel like his weight cut specifically had a lot to do with this fight, and that weird round 2 moment where Khamzat rolled over himself. I feel like it's just a showing about how rough the weight cut really was. Now we're actually going to talk about the situation I'm addressing and what Khamzat Chimaev's brother just came out and said. His brother pretty much said, with 2.5 pounds left to cut, his body shut down completely. I'm making this video to let you guys know that the Khamzat we saw, if you legitimately think that was the best version of Khamzat and Khamzat showed up healthy, then you're delusional. Now, I know some other people are going to look at this video and be like, well, this is a cope video, Kenny. Like, even though everything you're saying is objectively true, it's still cope because you're saying he only lost because of this. I'm not saying he only lost because of anything. I'm just saying what happened to his body before the fight definitely showed through glimpses of what happened in the fight.
And well, this story does line up with publicly available information, as Khamzat weighing in at the very last second and looking incredibly dejected while doing so supports the theory that Khamzat indeed struggled tremendously with the weight cut. But any professional fighter would tell you this: having a bad weight cut is no excuse for losing a fight. On the contrary, since Chimaev's little bro said that Khamzat's body shut down with 2.6 pounds left to go in the weight cut, that further goes to support the theory that Khamzat missed weight, which would then imply that Kadyrov's pet entered this fight with Strickland with an unfair weight advantage, which ironically would have been a somewhat valid excuse for Strickland if he had lost this fight. I also should add that since this admission by Chimaev's brother points to the fact that Chimaev didn't make the weight, the UFC and Khamzat Chimaev cheated Strickland and his team out of their share of his fight purse, which coach Eric Nixick says here.
The whole weight situation it's not that like, oh, he didn't make the weight and this and this and that. People forget, like, I don't know what Khamzat was getting paid. That's 20% or 30%. That's a big fine. You know, that money goes into Sean's pocket. That's all we cared about was like, yo, we want that fine money. You know, we want that tax, baby. Other than that, it's like, it is what it is. It is what it is. Like, we're gonna fight regardless. He could have been 5 pounds over. We're gonna, you know, Sean was gonna take the fight regardless. It doesn't matter. But you know, that's a good chunk of change had he been missing weight, and we would have got a little bit more money off that.
And here's the thing that these low IQ individuals, both in Khamzat's entourage and those cheering for him, don't seem to understand. Cutting weight as a fighter is part of the fight, and it is also part of the strategy of a fight. If a fighter wants to be very big for his weight class, he can choose to cut a ton of weight and size mog his opponents. However, there's also the option to not cut as much weight. There's Frankie Edgar, who was a UFC lightweight champion even though he was walking around at 160 pounds or something like that. And if you want a more modern example, there's Ian Gary, who only regained 10 pounds on fight day for his fight with Geoff Neal at UFC 298. If you want a size and strength advantage, sure, go ahead and cut a ton of weight. If you want to have greater cardio and better durability, you cut less. And in this case, Khamzat chose strength and size, and he ended up gassing out in the second round. And look, sure, Khamzat might have been 231 pounds when he started the fight camp for the Strickland fight, but he didn't take this fight on short notice or anything like that. He had months to prepare in advance, and if you're training full-time and are on a proper diet, it should be possible to lose 25 pounds of fat and then cut the remaining 25 pounds of water weight. Like, it's tough, but it is doable. And since we're talking about a championship caliber fighter who has access to essentially every tool in the toolbox for making weight that is available, that is something he should be able to do. And that is especially true since Khamzat used to be able to make welterweight. Like, people forget, man, this guy used to be in the same weight class as 5'9" former lightweight Gilbert Burns. And now, regarding whether Khamzat actually had a chance of fighting Yuri Prochazka up at light heavyweight, well, this is what Khamzat had to say about fighting Strickland prior to getting dog-walked by him.
After his fight, he's talking about me. It's just called Hunter. Give him this guy. Let me try his meat.
So, Khamzat, which was it? Did you want to fight Yuri? Or did you want to fight Strickland? Like, I'm sorry, Khamzat, I'm confused. Because what you're saying and what your brother is saying are at odds with each other. And all that just leads me to think that your brother is making excuses on your behalf. And when it comes to Khamzat flip-flopping on what he said, apparently he told Dana White after losing to Sean Strickland that this will be his final fight at middleweight.
It seemed like Khamzat really struggled to make the weight this time, and he said...
He literally walked up to me after the fight and said, I want to move up.
Yeah.
But now, a few days later, he's clamoring for a rematch, even saying that it is the only fight he would take. And guess where Khamzat's team wants that rematch? Abu Dhabi. Wow, it's almost like Khamzat wants to run the fight back in that one part of the world where the commission would allow Khamzat to miss weight again, since they've already let that slide when Khabib fought Justin Gaethje. And it's also the place where judges like Hadi Muhammad Ali score fights like Rinat Firketdinov versus Carlos Leal, 30-27 for Rinat, leading to it being called Robbery of the Year. And of course, it's also the place where Muhammad Naimov was allowed to repeatedly foul Nathaniel Wood without getting penalized once. Like, come on, man. Can Khamzat's team get any more whiny and pathetic? But anyways, since we're talking about a potential rematch with Strickland, let's look at who in the MMA community wants that rematch. So, I've bookmarked this matchmaking post from UFC Europe. UFC Europe, remember that. And I've looked through who exactly is pushing for a rematch to happen. So, there's this account that's gotten a couple likes saying, quote, as Chimaev's brother said, it was UFC and Dana White's fault. They changed their mind after Chimaev bulked for Yuri, so they must give him a rematch. Well, let's check the profile and the account location. Okay, so Indian flag and account based in South Asia. Okay, next, let's check this other reply from Samir Dewan. Rematch Khamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland. Strickland is afraid that Khamzat will lose to him in a rematch, so he is considering fighting Nasruddin. And now, I'm pretty sure that Mr. Dewan meant that Strickland is afraid that he would lose to Khamzat in a rematch, but anyways, let's just check where this account is based. And, well, it's based in India. And next, let's check Mr. Saad Khalik, replying with Khamzat, Abu Dhabi, October. Also based in South Asia. Well, needless to say, there is certainly a trend I'm seeing with Khamzat's fanbase, okay? But anyways, the obvious answer for Strickland's next fight is Nasruddin Imavov, who has more than earned his shot by beating Adesanya and Kyle Bohayo. And while Nasruddin did lose to Strickland, that is now far enough in the past to make the rematch compelling. And look, even Strickland doesn't like the idea of a rematch because it goes against the rankings.
Would you be interested in another fight with Chimaev in a rematch, or it was one and done?
No, again, as of always, you go get a couple W's and I'll see you again. It's just how it works. I truly believe ranking systems matter in the UFC. They should matter. And whenever they don't matter, I think it, belittles the sport. So just go get a couple W's and I'll see you again.
So no, Khamzat and all of you Khamzat fans, you aren't getting your rematch. You guys are getting Joe Pyfer, and you all better pray that you get it in October in Abu Dhabi. Although, when you consider Khamzat's activity, there's a good chance he doesn't fight for another year or two. And besides, Strickland is too injured anyways to fight in October, as according to Sean, he has a Type 2 AC separation, extended Type 5 slap tear, and partial rotator cuff tearing or tendonitis, all which are injuries that could leave him out for the next 8 months. In contrast, besides his face getting brutally jabbed up, the former UFC champion who supposedly married a 17-year-old after kidnapping her is in such great condition that he already has a wrestling match booked in Real American Freestyle against Dylan Dennis. Which is, well, it's very interesting considering how recently Kadyrov's dog's body supposedly shut down and how recently he went through a 5-round title fight in the UFC. And while Strickland may have sustained those injuries during the course of the fight with Khamzat, he may have also just shown up on fight night with them and fought through the pain, which would just make Khamzat's loss that much more humiliating. However, there are certain people who are still coping with how Khamzat got robbed and how he didn't lose that fight, which conveniently takes us to the hilarious cope fest / crash out that MMA Joey is having.
Jab from Chimaev, stumbles Strickland backwards. Let's go! Let's go! 4-1 Chimaev! He outstruck him for 4 rounds! He outstruck him for 4 rounds! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Outstruck him in a jab fest! Beat him in the 5th round! Clear 4-1 Chimaev. Clear 4-1 Chimaev. Strickland's going like this. It's the clearest 4-1 I've ever seen. There's no way they rob him. It's not possible. You can only give Strickland round 2. And that's a clear win for Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev went in there and jabbed Strickland to death. Holy shit. There's no way they even rob him. It's a clear decision. If they rob him, I'll lose my mind. It's clear 4-1. I think it's going to be a unanimous decision. It's split. It's split. They robbed him. They brutally robbed him. It was 4-1. That's a brutal robbery. That's a brutal robbery. That's literally a brutal robbery. There's no way. He lost 4-1, bare minimum 3-2. That's legitimately a robbery. That's the biggest robbery I've ever seen. That's crazy. They robbed him. They legit robbed. That's a clear state robbery. How did he lose 1-4-5? How did he lose 1-4-5? In what universe?
And well, I'm sure you guys already know this, but there is simply no way you could score that fight to Khamzat. And this is very clear if you go to the UFC stats website. Sean Strickland outlanded Khamzat by 25 significant strikes throughout the fight and 23 total strikes too. And if you count up the strikes by round, you would see that Sean outstruck Khamzat in rounds 2, 3, and 5. And while you might see certain very unbiased people arguing that the forward pressure and control time that Khamzat got in round 5 makes up for the difference in strikes, that's not how the scoring criteria works. Control time is only supposed to be factored in when there is no difference in damage, and in round 5, Strickland was the one landing the cleaner shots. And besides, you really can't count Chimaev's control time for anything outside of the first round, where no strikes are landed on either side. And that's because Chimaev landed 0 ground strikes throughout this entire fight. This fight is clearly a 48-47 decision victory for Sean. It was a close fight, but it was clear. However, some people can't seem to accept that fact. And MMA Joey has released an entire page worth of tweets coping. But frankly, I don't even think that's worth covering at this point because we all know that MMA Joey is a grifter who makes money off of rage bait. Instead, let's look at some actual, genuine A-grade cope. And the best example of such cope comes from the former male adult model and hotel corner room chair enthusiast turned streamer, Sneako. While I play the footage of Sean Strickland himself beating Sneako to a pulp in the background, let's read Sneako's tweet before the fight. Khamzat Chimaev is going to moss on Strickland exactly how everyone expects. And well, let's read what Sneako posted after the fight. Getting in the ring is for Goyim. We can bloody our faces, spit on each other, insult your face, and curse his mother. But their hands are not dirtied counting the money made from our degradation. And now, leaving aside the grammatical abomination that this tweet is, with pronouns referring to who knows who, I'll be the first to admit that I understand what Sneako is getting at. Ari Emanuel, the CEO of TKO Group Holdings, is
Brazilian,
and his total compensation more than tripled from $18.1 million in 2024 to $67.4 million in 2025. It is very clear that the UFC and TKO Group Holdings are exploiting their fighters to increase returns for their C-suite executives and shareholders. And hey, Sneako, if you want to watch MMA that isn't run by a
Brazilian
CEO, you can always watch Ryzen instead, buddy. But setting that aside, one of the guys in the comments said it best. I wonder if you'd feel this way if Khamzat won. And we all know the answer to that. If Khamzat Chimaev had mauled Sean Strickland like Sneako said he was going to, we all know what the story was gonna be. Alhamdulillah, Khamzat is the greatest wrestler on earth and he has the same religion as me. He is the pound for pound #1 fighter because we pray to the same God. We are the best because we are one ummah, or something like that, okay? It happened when Khamzat won the belt. It happened when Islam Makhachev became double champ. But as soon as these guys lose, like we saw with Umar, Ankalaev, and now Khamzat, their fans, many of whom, like Sneako, only cheer for them because it makes them feel superior for having the same religion as them, end up trashing the entire sport of MMA like Sneako did in this tweet. Like, imagine calling every fighter who stepped into the cage or the ring cattle, since that's what the G word means, because that's what Sneako did. Unironically, that's probably worse than any insult I've ever called Khamzat, and I've talked a ton of trash about Khamzat in the past. For fans like Sneako, the sport of mixed martial arts is just another tool to proselytize and assert supremacy over others. And that is why when we saw Umar lose, when we saw Ankalaev lose, and now as we're seeing in the aftermath of Khamzat's loss, everybody who is fed up with that fan base are getting together to clown them. And before you go and say, but every fan base is annoying, I can tell you this. Yes, every MMA fanbase is annoying, and every MMA fanbase has bad apples, but there are levels to how awful different fanbases are. And just to prove my point, I'll just let you know what it's been like ever since Tyra got beaten up by Van. With the exception of like one guy, it's mainly just people checking in on me to see if I'm alright, or just messaging me how they're equally bummed out that Tyra lost. And in my case, I made a prediction video with Tyra by murder in the thumbnail. If anybody was going to get a ton of hate, it was gonna be me, since I'm probably the biggest Japanese name in the English-speaking MMA community. But here's the thing, most people aren't hating on Tyra after he lost to Van. They're mainly just talking about how good of a fight Tyra versus Van was, and about how good Joshua Van is. Like, I'm bummed out that Tyra lost to Van. I really wish he'd won, but Tyra put on a hell of a fight, gave it his all, and took the loss with stride. Like, Taira isn't on Twitter begging Joshua Van for a rematch in Tokyo while already performatively running in the street while having someone film him to try and prove that he's ready to fight. Taira's fanbase, both Japanese and international fans included, just aren't annoying enough to warrant a tirade of hate. In contrast, the sheer irritation that has been caused by that fanbase really does end up resulting in them getting clowned on, which is what I'm doing here in this video. And now, here at the end, I'm just going to say this. For that fanbase, they vicariously live through fighters like Khabib, Islam Makhachev, and Khamzat to an extremely unhealthy degree. For example, if you look at how they speak about Khabib and kiss the dirt he walks on, you'd think he was some kind of deity, which is why Khabib is able to get away with constantly running cryptocurrency scams on them. And when one of these guys loses, there is always an excuse. When Umar lost to Merab, it was supposedly because he had broken his hand. When Alex Pereira KO'd Ankalaev, it was because Ankalaev's ribs were injured, in precisely the spot that Alex was elbowing them during the finishing sequence. And now that Khamzat lost, it was because of a bad weight cut, because he was bulking for the Yuri fight, or because he got robbed even though the stats clearly say otherwise, and now the UFC has to do a rematch in Abu Dhabi, and Khamzat won't accept any other fight. And if all the excuses fail, well, the whole sport of MMA is worthless circus entertainment, and the fighters are cattle, as Sneeko said. Anyways, the point I'm getting at here is this. There is a reason why that fanbase has such a bad reputation. And frankly, it is because many of them aren't real fans of mixed martial arts. They aren't there to actually enjoy the fights or to appreciate technique. No, they're watching out of a sense of pure, unadulterated tribalism. It really is a hive mind in the purest sense of the term. They're watching because they want to feel superior and validated, which is why they just can't accept it when one of their guys loses. And that delusional tribalism is what causes the rest of the fanbase to despise them and laugh at them when they have these collective crash-outs. It truly is glorious and hilarious at the same time. And I have to say that I have relished every second of it. Also, the guest of the channel and first interviewee, Ryan Cafaro, won his debut on Ryzen, so congratulations to him. Goodbye.